Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this 2021 Fall Soccer Preseason webinar. My name is John Skees, and I'm the Director of Media for TAPS. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, but before we do, I've got a couple of housekeeping items to address with you first. So, this webinar is being recorded. You're going to receive an email with a link to that recording as soon as it's ready. That should be later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. If you have any questions as we go through today's presentation, please use the questions feature on the GoToWebinar interface. We're going to try to answer those as we go, but if we don't get to your question right away, there is a general Q&A at the end of the presentation. If we still don't get to your question, if we run out of time, or if your question is just too specific to answer appropriately in this venue, please send us an email, info@taps.biz, or call us at the office once the webinar is over. Okay, today I am joined by Brian Bunselmeyer, TAPS Executive Director, Robert Huckabee, TAPS Associate Director and Director of Compliance, Steve Prudhomme, TAPS Associate Director, and Will Dixon from the TAPS office staff. He's helping us out behind the keyboard today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Thank you for joining us here today. TAPS Fall Soccer 2021. Season's begun. You may not be playing yet, but you're eligible to play games this week or scrimmage as you see fit. Fall soccer, we're glad to be able to provide that opportunity for championships for our young men. Remember, it is a boys' sport. Girls are allowed to play because there's no corresponding girls' sports, so that does work out to the benefit of some of our squads. I'm going to hit real quick on the TAPS important dates. So your first games begin this Monday if you wanted them to. District certification is October the 26th. The area games are the 30th. The regional games are the 4th. And then the semifinals are on the 8th and 9th. If you happen to make it to the championship semifinals, that is a Monday and a Tuesday. It is a little change, but we're going to go back to Round Rock Multipurpose Center. And sometimes when your host says these are the dates available, and it's such a good place, you take them. So we are going to go on a Monday, Tuesday. Hopefully we skip around the area games on the 30th, and then until the 4th, we do give time for your kids that are in cross country to go participate in that as well on the 1st. So really do appreciate all of you that are participating this year. Some of you are coming back. We did have quite a few drops last year in fall soccer, and we are hoping that most folks that had to sit out last year due to COVID and COVID protocols are able to come back. We still got a little time in the season for folks to make up their minds. Again, make sure you're reaching out to your district president. Make sure you get your district schedules prepared and ready to go. Robert, talk to us a little bit about the brackets and how they're going to look this year versus last year and when we can expect them.
Okay, welcome everyone. Everybody's always interested in those playoff brackets coming out. We'll have those to you by about September 1st. We have a process here in the office. We put those together, review those. We send them out to our athletic executive committee. They put their eyes on them as well. Look over those, and then those are finally approved by our executive board. So that'll be happening over the next couple of weeks. We'll have those out to you the first part of September. Our bracket development is going to return back to normal this year with a lot of our sports and activities. Last year, we expanded our brackets, brought in more teams. We had a lot of teams that didn't play or begged out as they moved to the playoffs. We opened up those brackets, included more teams in some areas to fill those brackets. This year, however, we're going to return back to normal, which is our normal 50% rule from the district, plus fill in some other areas. We don't have a huge number of schools playing fall soccer, so we have our districts spread out around the state, and we have our north half of the bracket and our south half that play their way to those Final Four and championship games.
I want to welcome a couple of new schools that are joining into TAPS this year, and they are playing fall soccer. So hopefully everybody will welcome them in with open arms. Always good to get new people to play. Talking about the rules and governance of TAPS, we're going to hit you with a little bit right here. The rules and governance of TAPS, we're going to jump to the basics of TAPS rules and TAPS eligibility. They are found on the TAPS website. Will, if you'll jump over to the TAPS website, www.taps.biz, and you're going to jump over there and just hover over resources for me. And that's where you're going to find the bylaws. Second thing down is bylaws. So that may change here in a couple of weeks when we update the website. But right now, bylaws are there. It's a long document. But if you need that sleeping pill, sometimes that's the perfect antidote for that. You can just take care of it and go on down the road. Robert, tell us just a little bit about, go back to the website, go back to the PowerPoint, Will. The basic rules of TAPS, where are they found? I think it all starts with that term interscholastic competition. Give us an idea of what that means and why that's important, especially during fall soccer.
So for our schools in our organization, we are high school school-based organization. So all of our competition needs to be interscholastic. That's school-based, so that's school teams playing school teams. That applies to scrimmages, tournaments, and games. Our basic rules for soccer are found in Section 170 of the bylaws. Like Brian mentioned, you can go there to the website, go to resources, scroll over bylaws, click on that. A big Google Doc will populate for you. You can scroll down to Section 170 and find those rules there. We do talk always about game limits. TAPS does not have game restrictions per day or per week. That's up to your local school, up to your district to put your district school together, district schedule together. But we defer to local control in your school administration when it comes to the number of times you might play in a day or in a week. And then, of course, when we move to our playoff round, you are allowed one warm-up game per round of the playoffs. That is still allowed.
I think it's important to mention in fall soccer, a lot of our schools only play one game a week, but we don't have that limitation. If weather causes a makeup, please make sure that you bounce back out and get that made up as soon as possible. Don't just run it back to the end of the year. Believe it or not, weather seems to be a little worse October, November than it is in September in most places. I know we've had that trouble in the San Antonio area, Austin area. It's come back to bite us there in October when we get caught and get bound up at the end and can't get the games in. Going to eligible opponents, Robert, talk to us just a little bit about eligible opponents, who you can and who, more importantly, probably who you can't play and why that's important to TAPS.
Those are found in Section 138, where we talk about scheduling. That bylaw section remains in place. Remember, you need to play school-based programs. That's other school programs. You can play homeschool programs. That's certainly allowed. Just make sure those homeschool organizations have the general eligibility requirements similar to TAPS. You don't want to be playing students who've already graduated or not in high school. But check with them and make sure that they align with our general eligibility rules, and certainly you can play them. Those details are spelled out there in Section 138. Affiliated leagues, the UIL, other private school leagues that are allowed, certainly those school-based teams you can play. And then what's not allowed, club teams, those are not interscholastic. Those are not school-based teams. You can't play club or independent teams. And then schools of members of non-approved leagues. If you have questions about those leagues that are or are not approved, reach out to our office. There are several spelled out there in Section 138. But if you have a question, we know sometimes schools move league affiliations or independent status. We can help you walk through that.
I think every year we get that call about, can I play a club team in a game? You can't call it a game. You could practice against them or scrimmage against them to a certain extent, Robert, but you can't play the game. Can't pull the officials, pull the fans, and go and make it a real game. So you could actually work some ways through practice if you need to work that through. The TAPS official game ball is in Section 138, is the Wilson Forte. It's a good ball. It does curve quite a bit. You are required to use that for games, so if you're required to use it for game, we do have a minimum requirement of 3 balls that follows in with the National Federation rule as well. So we don't care what you practice with. We don't care what you scrimmage with, but by the time you get out there and represent TAPS in your school, it's the Wilson Forte for the game ball. So make sure if you're using the minimum of 3, 1 behind each goal, 1 in the mid, you got to have those 3 there. Steve, talk to us a little bit about why it's important to have that game information on the website in Rank 1. Why is that important?
Right. First of all, with Rank 1, you need to have your schedule put in and made public. Schedule in and turn it to public off of private. And that's the main thing that we need done this time of year. Also, you can be putting your scores in, but we're also going to be coming up with some additional information on how to score report. And to give you a little bit of a preview of that, it should be half the work for you. So, again, that information will be coming out. But the number one thing we need right now is to get all information into Rank 1, make sure it's right, make sure it's public, and get the scores in. Also, if there's any issues with people not reporting scores, we need the leadership of the districts to kind of come in and give them that gentle reminder. And then we also have a reminder from our office. But if we can do that at the district level, it will help us tremendously.
While we're on scores, let's just make sure it's important because we're strung from Lufkin to Brownsville, to San Antonio, to Austin, to Sherman, wherever we're playing out there in fall soccer. There's a lot of territory in between our schools. It's hard sometimes for them to pick up a paper and find out what your score is. So make sure you get your scores, your varsity scores in there. The other part that is important that comes up every year is TAPS does require that every contest is brought to a conclusion. So there are no ties in TAPS soccer. That's true of fall and winter. So make sure you have at your district level, and then as you go into playoffs, playoff and understanding if we're tied at the end of regulation, what are we going to do at that point? Are we going to play the 2 golden goals? You can amend the TAPS rules. If once you get to the playoffs, it's 2 golden goals followed by PKs at the end. Hopefully we don't get to PKs. There's a better way to end it, but that's the best way we've got right now. But district games all must come to a conclusion. There must be a winner and, unfortunately, a loser in each contest. The other side of that that I would say comes into play as well, I know some were trying to play a shortened game in some tournament play, shorten the minutes or whatever. Again, you're bringing them to a conclusion. It's not like pool play in the Olympics, and it's not like that same play in an international competition. You are bringing things to a conclusion. Steve, walk us in about officials, and especially during this time when a lot of schools, the UIL and TAPS schools, are not playing soccer right now. This is a kind of a single season for TAPS with these fall soccer schools. What do they need to know about officials?
First of all, they need to make sure that they get sanctioned, approved officials by TAPS. And so that's all TASO chapters. You can go to taso.org and see the ones that are in your area. You also can go and go on the website, look under resources officials. If you follow that down, you'll find the list of sanctioned officials. Those sanctioned by TAPS and all TASO chapters are okay. And again, these are not just a patch on their arm. They are TASO or they're approved chapter trained. They're a member, and they're assigned. So all 3 of those things must happen to make sure that not only are you getting who you think you're getting, but you also have the umbrella of the insurance, you have the background checks, and also the training as well, and making sure that we're rotating officials and you don't have to see, John Smith there every single time you go to that field. So we tell these chapters they need to be rotating their people. You need somebody new. And again, you need to make sure that they are truly coming from an approved chapter. In some parts of the state, a little bit better than other parts of the state, and we hear about that. Guys, that is the bylaws, that is the rules. So make sure that you have your officials lined up and get a contract with them.
So TASO or TAPS approved chapter and assigned is very important. Again, remember that every mom, dad, and fan behind you is an official in their own mind. They seem to know what the rules are and what they aren't, and it's going to take somebody that's trained and can handle the contest out there in the middle. We don't care whether you use a 2 or a 3 system. If you are using the 2 system, make sure your opponent agrees to that. If you're going to go to the more traditional 3 with the 2 ARs and the R1, make sure you agree upon that ahead of time as well. If it has happened in fall soccer more than it has anywhere else, you get there and there's only 1. If you begin that contest with only 1 official, if you're going with a solo mid or if you have to bounce from a R1 and 2 ARs to another system, once you start the contest, there's no playing that game in protest. It goes straight through to the end. So just make sure you remember it's good to think that you can play it in protest, but you can't. So once you start the contest, you're going to play it to its natural conclusion. We'll bounce back over to the TAPS website for me, if you would. We're going to talk about NFHS rules for just a moment. You're going to go to athletics, www.taps.biz, click on athletics, and then click on fall soccer. That's the page. We'll talk about it more here in a minute. But up there in the red bar under rules, you've got the TAPS rules, and then you've got the NFHS rules. So if you're not used to playing by NFHS rules, or if you think you might know them, or you kind of knew them 3 years ago, please make sure you reach out, jump over there to that rule book. Will and I studied the rules quite a bit last year, looking at when to take a drop and how to take a drop and where it hits an official. Those have been changes, and we got to see them play out to be honest with you, on several stages as those changes have gone through a lot of soccer. The uniform requirements, I'm going to say something for Will and I as we broadcast the game. Remember that you do need numbers on the front and back of your jersey, and the more contrasting those numbers are, the better. I know sometimes we want to hide a 5 and a 6, but it's real hard for the announcer and the official to tell from a distance away, and you don't want the wrong person getting credit, good or bad. So, and then if you click on updates, it'll be the changes for this year, and there weren't that many. So again, www.taps.biz, click on athletics, click on fall soccer, and then that'll bounce you down there on that rule bar. You can jump over there and get them. We'll jump back to our PowerPoint for me. We're going to have the uniform rules and regulations again. Make sure I will say that soccer is probably one of the ones that's lagged more than a bunch, is making sure their uniforms are up to date. So make sure you do use that uniform. Make sure they're in room. Make sure your numbers are big enough. Make sure you've got it marked. Socks are a big thing in soccer. Make sure you got the right color of socks on when you're playing. The officials seem to know that rule quite a bit. It's brought up to us. So if you've got any questions, please reach out to us. Again, the changes are there. www.taps.biz. Click on athletics. Click on fall soccer. In the red menu bar, you'll hover over rules and drop down to changes. Robert, that brings us to eligibility. Since you are the Director of Compliance, talk to us a little bit about staff and student eligibility.
Okay, all coaches and all participants in TAPS need to establish eligibility every year. We'll look at our eligibility. Obviously, rank 1 is our database for that. All your coaches need to be in rank 1. All your students, your participants need to be in rank 1 with everything complete on those rosters, schedules done, and everything ready to go. As we look at coach and staff eligibility, that's all high school coaches, varsity or sub-varsity. That's all roles. Make sure if you have coaches at your school that have multiple roles, that all those roles are checked appropriately in rank 1. We'll talk about communication here in a minute. That's how we pull our communication base and send out our emails and information, is by sport or activity, and we need everyone selected in there correctly in rank 1. For all your coaches, if it's not already done, if you have new people or you have changeover, you'll create that coach profile, put all their pertinent information in there. We ask you to include, there's a place for their cell number and email. That helps us tremendously. We'll only use that in situations where we need to reach out and get information directly from those people. They'll complete their professional acknowledgement of rules. They'll sign those every year and complete their scope requirements. Once all that's been done for your coaches, they should show up as compliant versus non-compliant, and they should be good to go for the year. As we move on to students, the students have a profile to complete in rank 1 as well. If they're new to your school, they'll open that account. The parents will, and do that at the beginning. Even returning students have to update that profile each year. They'll complete their acknowledgement of rules, upload all their medical information there, and then any school-based forms that you require that you have added into rank 1, those will be completed there as well. And if students are new to your school, obviously that's transfer students. There is a separate process, extra information they need to complete in order to establish eligibility. The same is true for international students and then students not living with parents. As the parents go through that profile, there aren't many questions they answer there, but as they answer those questions correctly, it will populate any of those additional forms or applications they need to complete.
For a lot of our schools, fall soccer is the first team sport that they come up to, so it's important that we get the transfer process for those students that are new to school and other situations as soon as possible. So an 8th grader that is moving into 9th grade is not considered a transfer student. They're just matriculating from the 8th to 9th grade. However, if they have started at another school or if they move into your school as a high school student, there is an eligibility process that must be followed in order for them to become eligible. Robert, hit the highlights of that for us so that we can just kind of review really quickly how that transfer process works.
So as I mentioned earlier, as they complete their profile, if they check that box about being a transfer student, rank 1 will populate for them their student transfer form. Parents complete that, fill out all that information. That's an online submission, comes directly to our office. If they participated in high school, in the current or the previous year at their previous school in any activities, then they'll need a PAPF as well. That's a previous athletic participation form. That's just the one-page form where you fill out the basic information at the top, and then that goes to the previous school, to their athletic administration. They answer a few questions there, sign it, get it back to you or to the school, and then that PAPF is uploaded in rank 1 into the student file. Once our office receives both of those, we scrub those, we look over those, we make sure that there aren't any red flags there aren't any missing dates or signatures. And when we've done that, we're satisfied everything looks in order. We send that out to your district, to all the ADs and coaches in that particular sport in your district, and they have 2 days to answer any questions or raise any objections. If there are none at the end of those 2 days on the beginning of the third day, those are marked approved in rank 1. Until that process has been completed, they are not eligible to participate. We have worked diligently here in the office. Delaney in our office, you might receive emails from her. She's working on those, assisting me with that. And we've already processed the volleyballs, the fall soccers. We're working on football now because you guys were the first ones to come up with games, so we wanted to get those processed as quickly as possible. If your kids or parents have questions because it's not done yet, then please handle that through your athletic administration. Let us help them walk through that and make sure all your students are eligible before they participate.
Yes, and build your student roster, create the team, build the roster, and you'll see what's red and what's green. And obviously red means stop, and you need to see what's not there. The great value of a system such as Rank 1 is it will catch those that need certain information or catch those profiles that are not completed properly, and that kind of covers you and covers us and really helps. So, again, pull them into the roster and then look and see what color they are and then follow up to make sure they're doing that. Again, that'll be a great help to you and to our office as well.
The number one thing that's going to keep a student from going green is going to be a lack of a physical or medical history. So please encourage, before you start play, they need to have that medical history form completed on file for your medical staff, whether it be your nurse or trainer to look at. You also need to have the annual physical. TAPS does require an annual physical. So again, this year with COVID and the spike, if they can't get in today or tomorrow or haven't got it done yet, it may take a little while. But we really need to protect the students, and we need to protect the staff as well. Get those physicals in as soon as possible. Communication, that's a big part of what we do here in TAPS. It's just kind of make sure we keep those lines open with our schools. Understanding that our website, www.taps.biz, click on athletics, click on fall soccer, and on that page you're going to find on the right-hand side a soccer blog. So every time we send out an email to our fall soccer coaches, we're also going to include that email information there. So www.taps.biz, click on athletics, click on fall soccer, bookmark that fall soccer page. Our emails can only be sent to the email account shown in rank 1. So as an AD and as a coach, if you're a new coach, make sure that you get your email, make sure you're listed. If you're assistant coaches, they also need to be in there as well. Every now and then we might have to do a push notification for rank 1. You'll get an email from rank 1 saying, hey, something's happening at TAPS, go check the website. So you just make sure that you don't put that in the spam folder. And then finally on Twitter, social media, at TAPS Soccer, as you take your pictures, as you reports, we want to know that as well. So please make sure you go ahead and include us at TAPS Soccer, and at TAPS Biz is our main Twitter account. And then again, Facebook would be TAPS Biz as well. Kind of things like we got a system going there with TAPS and Biz, but that's where we are. Robert, talk to us now. As we talk about communication, they're going to need to be able to communicate about COVID with their families, with their staff, and with their stakeholders. Talk to us a little bit about COVID-19 requirements, what that communication, what those standards are going to look like this year.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Will, if you would, before we jump into this COVID conversation, jump back to the website. Let me show all our listeners where our recent COVID protocols are found. You may be referring to these frequently, as we all did last year. Up there at the top under resources, if you hover over that first item is COVID-19 information. If you select that one, it will take you to about a 4 or 5 page document where we have published, we did this last week, we have published our 2021-22 COVID protocols as we know them at the present. So that's where you can find those. Go to that home page, go to resources, find that COVID-19 information tab, and then you will see you can take the time to read through those. They're very similar to a lot of the things we did last year, but we'll discuss a few of those as we hop back, Will, to that PowerPoint presentation. When we talk about COVID-19 requirements, one of the most important things is our communication between our schools, the opponents we're going to be playing. This will be very similar to what we did last year. We'll have those pregame communications. You'll be communicating to your opponent whether you're the home team hosting it at your facility or some facility you use, or whether you're going to be the visiting team. I know a lot of our schools in the fall soccer world might rent fields for their games, so you might have some COVID protocols that apply to the facility you're using. Make sure you know what those are. If you're using a city field or something like that that's owned by some municipality, you may not even be able to get that field in some instances, or you may have certain restrictions. Whatever those might be, please communicate that to your opponents. That's very, very important. Everybody did a great job of that last year. We want to continue that this year. And when we move to the teams are responsible to communicate to each other the affirmations that everybody is well, not having COVID issues on the day of the game. The home team obviously has the additional responsibility of communicating with the officials. The home team also has the staff that be required to host the game, whether that's the announcer or other facility personnel. All those people involved, participants, fans, spectators, everyone needs to have that affirmation that they are well and good to go from a COVID perspective. Same is true with the officials. The home team will be responsible to communicate with the officials, and the officials will communicate back to you that they are good to go. What is that pregame affirmation? Let's just remind everyone. Everyone involved or attending the contest will be self-screening for those COVID conditions and representing that they are good to go. Those self-screening shall include at a minimum that positive affirmation. They do not have the COVID symptoms. They're not positive for COVID, nor have they had recent close contact with anyone who is. So those are the same things we did last year. We'll keep that in place for this year. We had all hoped we'd be beyond this by now, but we're not. We're still dealing with issues, and so we'll continue that process as we move to communicating about our contest with our opponents.
So basically our health and safety protocols, they haven't changed a whole lot from last year, but we're shifting to our support is of each individual school and your school protocols and how they move us forward. So as you think about it, if it's your school rule that says test for COVID positive is going to sit you for 10 days or move you out for 10 days, that's how that's going to impact your program. If a classroom or if a team based on your school rules winds up with the positive test, then you've got to figure out how is that going to affect you as you move down the road. So again, let's talk about real quick, how does it affect my program? Well, it's going to affect your program in several ways. As far as practice time, it's going to be whatever you and your school determine to be in the best interest of your students. So again, if you are in session and in person and you want to have practice, we're all about that. If your school has determined that you're going to close school for 2 weeks as a precautionary measure or 10 days or whatever it may be, then you could still have practice and you could still move forward. However, if your school shuts down because of COVID incidents in your school based on your policy, then you should not be having practice or games. And we'll be here to help you walk through that should that situation occur. Contest, Robert, talk to us about how this COVID is going to affect us if we and when we see it rear its head this year.
So we have planned to continue the year as posted on the calendar. Last year we got off to a delayed start. This year we're starting on time. All those dates are posted on the calendar. We'll push through the season, continue to monitor situations. We do anticipate, though, with what's going on right now, there will be some issues. We've heard of some already in volleyball that there are some issues with some teams. So there's a possibility we'll have no contest, just like we did again last year. If you have COVID issues, make sure to communicate that to your opponent, whether that's prior to the game and the game's not played, or whether you just played a game and you need to advise your opponent that, hey, we had a positive show up and just wanted to give you a heads up. So we will have some of that as we move throughout the season. Our schools did a great job last year of rescheduling those games, certainly those district games. We'd like you to get those rescheduled as quickly as possible. Let's play as many of those as we can as we move toward district certification. But just know that's a reality out there that you probably will be dealing with and plan accordingly.
I think with the pregame match, especially with the officials, Tasso is going to stick with what they had. They're going to ask for one coach and one player from each team. Face mask would be appreciated, but at least social distancing when you go through things. Of course, if you're requiring face mask on your side, you definitely want to have them on when you're out there. Player introductions and pre-match ceremonies, we're saying you can go back to the normal, the traditionals. Just make sure both schools agree. If you're going to do a step out or a handshake, just make sure everybody's in agreement before the game what we're going to do. During the contest, the same protocols apply. If you at your school want your players on the bench to wear masks, do so. If you want your players on the field to play to wear a mask, do so. If the officials want them to wear a mask, they can do so. What you cannot do is force your opponent to do that. So if you say we're going to wear a mask at all times and your opponent says no, obviously you need to understand they don't have to wear a mask under TAP's policies, and then you can determine whether you're going to play that match or not, depending on how hard your policies are in place. The uniform allowances are still in play. If you want to wear long sleeves, long pants, the undergarments, just make sure that you meet the color. Must be a single color if you're wearing the longer shorts underneath, or the color, the dominant color on the uniform top. Make sure you're in compliance with that. It's 100 degrees outside right now. I don't think I'm going to see any of the traditional long pants, but we might see long sleeves. You can still wear the sun shirt as long as it maintains these compliance opportunities. After the match, again, within 72 hours, if you have folks on your team that start presenting symptoms or test positive, please make sure you notify your opponent and the officials that were at the contest. We expect them to do the same, and that's just going to be a situation we have. So post-match, make sure if you find that. Again, on the field of play, if you want to do handshakes, just make sure both coaches know we're not saying you can't. Last year we said you can't. This year, if you want to shake hands after the match and do the handshake lines, that's fine. Please make sure both coaches are in agreement before you do that. And anyone that does not feel comfortable at that time should not be made to participate. I think that's where we'd leave that. Travel, again, is under local control. Robert, talk to us about how our protocols and they affect fans and fan attendance.
So when we move to actual game attendance, we dealt with this last year. We may have situations in certain communities. We may have certain schools of ours that have protocols that may want to limit fan attendance or stadium capacity. You certainly can do that if it's your facility. If you're renting a facility from a local municipality, which happens many times. Steve was talking to some people earlier today. Excuse me. About some of our championships later in the year, and they're even beginning discussions about possible capacity limits. You certainly can have those in place. Cannot apply to the participants in the game, but if you had restrictions regarding fans, communicate that to your opponents. Let them know we're going to have limited capacity, or we're going to ask people to wear a mask and social distance, similar to what we did last year. When it comes to fans, auxiliary groups, those kind of things, you can have those kind of protocols in place, but please make sure that's communicated to the other school so before they drive over there, they know what the expectation is.
I think the biggest thing is if you're not going to allow fans at your place, then that needs to be noted well in advance so your opponents know that. I will say as well, many of our fall soccer folks are renting a field, they're renting facilities. Make sure you're in communication with your park and rec department, with the school you're renting them from. Obviously, you would want to be a good renter, so you would want to apply their standards as they require, but your opponent needs to know that as well before they drive over. So make sure we're communicating that as best as possible. So what if a team cannot play a contest in non-district? Robert, how's that going to show up on the schedule or on the standings?
So that's going to be a no contest unless you can reschedule it and play it at a later date. We certainly would encourage you to get those district games replayed if possible. With regard to non-district games, that's up to you. But we'll have the same process as we did last year for a no contest. If it's COVID related, then the game shouldn't be played, and if it's not, then that would remain a no contest unless it can be rescheduled and played later.
So in the district scenario, we need the games played if possible. Again, if you cannot play it on a Tuesday, the facility's not available because of COVID or team, as soon as that team's available, they need to make them up. But that would be true of weather or any other situation occurred. So we're just asking you, if you have to do a makeup game, please don't stack them at the back end, because by that point, rain and other things, life seems to get in the way at the end of the season. So non-district, you can play it or not. In district, you need to play as many as possible. If you can't play it, it becomes a no contest. So that is not a forfeit. Let's just reiterate, it's not a forfeit, it's a no contest. It's as if it never occurred or could occur. Once you get to playoffs, though, Robert, that does change.
That does change. There is no opportunity for a no contest once we move into the playoffs. And it just makes sense if you think about it. We have to have a winner and loser at each round of the playoffs. Those dates are on the calendar for each round. And as we move through those, we had some unfortunate situations last year where schools in different sports throughout the year either had to bow out of the playoffs before they began or got into the playoffs and had to bow out because of COVID situations. Remember, you have your protocols at your school that control your students. So if you have a situation where you have a COVID outbreak in your team and your school protocol says, hey, we're quarantined for 10 days or whatever your rule might be, then we're going to honor that, and then we're going to have to move on with those who can participate in the playoffs.
That's especially true of the Final Four as well. Unfortunately, that came to bite us a couple of times last year. So the Final Four dates have been set. The locations have been secured. So we will play them on those days unless everyone can't play. So just keep in mind what it is and what it isn't. So we're looking forward to a great year. We've got a new year and new opportunities. We're welcoming our new schools into fall soccer. Welcome back to those that couldn't play last year. We're looking forward to a great season. Please keep us in that communication loop, info@taps.biz if you need us. Our phone number, 254-947-9268. Bookmark that fall soccer page, www.taps.biz. Click on athletics, click on fall soccer, bookmark that page. That right-hand blog is where we'll be reiterating any emails. Please do us a favor. If you are a coach, make sure you go into Rank 1. If you haven't been in Rank 1 yet, might be a good time to go start that process, get in there, get your acknowledgement of rules. Especially if you're the head coach, make sure that you are listed in there so that you're getting the emails as we send them out. We'll send them to your athletic director as well, but it's important we're all there together. Fall Soccer 2021, a new season with new opportunities. We look forward to seeing you all down the road. John, take us on out of here.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Robert, Steve, and Will for today's webinar on fall soccer. Like I said, folks, this recording will be made available later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. We're going to send a link to the same email that you used to register, and then you can share that with anybody on your campus who needs to see it. It's also going to be available on our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/tapsbiz. If you have any other questions, please let us know. Send us an email or call us at the office, and you folks, please enjoy the rest of your day.